This jumbo jet is the largest commercially built passenger plane in the world. It's built inside the world's biggest building. It was the first jet capable of carrying over 500 people. It piggybacks the space shuttle, and soon it will be capable of blasting missiles out of the sky with a laser. It has flown around 15 million flights, totaling 56 billion kilometers, 74,000 trips to the moon and back. This jet has made our world a smaller place. The Boeing 747 is a jet of gigantic proportions. After more than 3 decades in the sky, it still holds the record for being the largest civil aeroplane in the world. And it still inspires those who work on it every day.
We're the biggest and the best. The whole world over, everybody recognizes the profile of this airplane. Everybody knows that everything else is just an airplane, but this is a 747.
I'm out there with my child at the runway or something like that, and I see one of these take off and flying, and it's 100% satisfaction. You see something you built actually flying through the air. You tell your children, I made that.
But there is more to the jumbo jet than its staggering dimensions.
The first giant 747 is presented to the world.
1, 2, 3!
Throughout its long career, the 747 has continued to evolve. Since the day it first flew, it has kept pace with cutting-edge technology. The passion of the people who build it. The almost 400,000 square meter building in Everett, Washington, where these giant jets are built. These are the elements that combine to make the story of the Boeing 747 a tale of testing the limits and then flying beyond them.
Many of the people, from the engineers, the mechanics, the management that are here today, their fathers, their grandfathers, and aunts and uncles have all worked on the 747. I think all of us view it as a really important legacy that it's now our watch. It's our turn to carry on from here and make the airplane better and better.
The one thing everyone associates with the jumbo jet is its size.
This airplane is huge. It's because it's so big, you're just so awestruck by it.
The extreme size was something that you wouldn't think would ever get off the ground.
At over 70 meters long, the latest version of the 747, the 400 model, dwarfs every other commercial airliner in production. Its total wingspan is around 65 meters, but with full fuel tanks, this increases by half a meter because the weight of the tanks pulls the wings downwards. The wings alone cover an area of 520 square meters. That's parking space for 22 cars on each wing.
1186 or Kilo 12, looks like we have a clear shot to our alley.
1186, Kilo 13 to the gate, and
the plane's cockpit sits 9 meters off the ground. And the empennage, or tail section, at its height reaches 19 meters, or the same as a 5-story building. The volume of the jumbo jet means that even the weight of its internal air needs to be accounted for.
I suppose that the scale can't be underestimated, you know, when you think about the fact that when it's pressurised, the cabin is so enormous that the air inside of it weighs more than a tonne.
Fully fueled and loaded up, the 747-400 can weigh up to 400,000 kilograms. Soon that too will be exceeded by the next generation of extended-range 747s, the 400ER. This new giant will weigh up to 410,000 kilograms. That's 58 London buses.
The most amazing thing about the 400 is just how many people, how much cargo and baggage we put on, and then we add the fuel on top of it, and the thing just takes off. It never ceases to amaze me how these things get off the ground. It's just bewildering.
Merci, monsieur.
However violent the crime, clues can be scarce, motives unclear, and the victim vanished. If you want to catch the killer, you will need to delve deep, sift through all the evidence. It's often the smallest detail that leads to the biggest break. The new series of Forensic Detectives, starting 29th of January on Discovery.
Weighing upwards of 400,000 kilograms, the Boeing 747 Jumbo gets off the ground with the help of 4 specially designed turbofan engines. They generate more power than 7 F-18 fighters at full throttle. When the 747 reaches 320 kilometers per hour on the runway, a phenomenon called rotation occurs. Thanks to the physics of thrust and lift, 400,000 kilograms of aluminium, fuel, passengers and cargo are raised skyward.
But on takeoff, on rotation, the pilot was sitting 50 feet up in the air, and the passenger in the last row of the aeroplane, right at the back, was about 3 feet from the runway. So you can imagine that's quite a big machine.
Takeoff has certainly come a long way since the Wright brothers' first flight in 1903. Amazingly, the total distance of that first flight was less than the 45 meters of the average 747 economy section. Despite the 747's bulk, it's still fast. This jet can reach traveling speeds of 1,160 kilometers per hour.
The airplane was designed with a high-speed wing when it was originally designed. The wing has been improved somewhat over the years, but and to this day is still the fastest subsonic commercial jet transport in the world.
And while the speed indicators in the cockpit don't go beyond Mach 1, sometimes during testing the jet does. That's over 1,200 kilometers per hour.
When we do flutter testing to show that the airplane high-speed characteristics are acceptable, we're required to fly out to 0.97 or 97% of the speed of sound. And that's a very dynamic condition. It involves diving the airplane pretty sharply. And then you have to do maneuvers once you get to that Mach number. There have been probably cases where there has been, at least locally on the airplane, some supersonic flow.
Following its development, airports around the world spent millions to accommodate this new jumbo jet.
A key part of the 747 introduction into service, and again even more so with the 400, was how on earth do we fit this around an airport that's built for smaller jets? And that was a key question. In fact, so much so that it helped define what's called the 80-meter box, which is the outside diameter, or the outside dimensions of a notional box within which everybody has tried to stay since.
Airport blast fences also had to grow to cope with the 500-kilometre jet wind that explodes 30 metres behind the plane when the engines are at full throttle. The Boeing 747-400 is one of the world's biggest and fastest aeroplanes, but there are plenty of other reasons why it qualifies as a superstructure. It takes the population of a small city, more than 6 million parts, and the largest building in the world to complete just one plane. From the hand riveting to the final handshake on delivery, the 747's manufacturing process is as rigorous as it is complex. When Boeing launched the 747 family of jets in 1966, the company had not yet bought the land on which to build them. Finally, a site was selected in Everett, Washington State. 313 hectares, 3.1 million square meters. The record-breaking jet would be built just steps behind the record-breaking building that housed it.
So they built the building, and they got about 3/4 of the way done, and in the back shops they started loading the first airplane's parts, and were actually assembling the airplane as they were putting the roof on the end of the building.
Today, the building where Boeing assembles its wide-body jets covers nearly 400,000 square meters, 1,500 tennis courts. It's held the record for being the world's largest building by volume for over 30 years. It's the size of a small city.
It is a city. Everything from fire departments to medical staffs to food service. I mean, you name it. You got it in this building. It is a small city.
An avalanche of aluminium jet parts pour into this vast building, brought here by cargo ship, train, truck, and even the cargo-carrying 747 itself. 670 manufacturers from all over the world supply the more than 6 million parts that eventually become a Boeing 747-400. More than half this number are rivets. Jeff Hatfield is one of the 1,000 or so people needed to assemble a single 747. Working on the biggest commercial airliner in the world is a source of pride.
You know, it's neat. It's a good feeling inside, seeing something fly around that you worked on, put together, built.
In fact, the entire population of the factory feel there's something wonderful about transforming small components into a jumbo jet.
Actually, we're pretty proud of how fast we can actually build a 747. If you look at the time, the very first part that comes into this factory, from that time to the time we actually deliver it to an airline customer, it's approximately 4 months, somewhere in that neighborhood, 4.5 months.
In those 4.5 months, panels of prefabricated aluminium become sub-assemblies of wings, tail sections and fuselage parts. The factory's night shift then puts these sections together in an exacting process called the final body join.
We like to tell everybody this is the first time it actually becomes a real airplane. Until now, it's just pieces.
So the front end, the middle, with the wings attached, and the back end, those 3 major sections all come into a what we call final body joint.
Completing the final body join of the 747 would be impossible without the 50-kilometre highway of crane tracks, suspended 34 metres above the factory floor.
149, Lenny, any luck on that access, Dan?
A network so big it requires its own control tower.
10-4, Cab 7, guy.
Cab 7, we're 24, go ahead.
18 cranes, some capable of carrying 40,000 kilograms, span the vast upper reaches of the building, moving the sections of the jet into place.
It's just a lot of work and a lot of movement, and what we call it is the dance in the sky, because if you look here at about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning on a line move night, things are flying all over the place, and it's a real choreography.
Merging giant fuselage panels with microscopic precision was once a matter of moving slowly and judging the gaps by eye.
It never went together exactly the same way every time, so we had a lot of really great mechanics that thank God they were, because without their knowledge and skill, never could have got them to come together.
These days, a digital design system, CATIA, or computer-aided three-dimensional interactive applications, has helped standardize the 747's fuselage parts and made joining them together both a simpler and more precise operation.
Now that we have digital engineering, basically is a Lego approach. You take one Lego and you match the holes in the Lego up with the hole or the peg in the other Lego, and you put them together.
Getting this final body join just right is crucial.
This is what determines how the airplane's going to fly. If we don't get the sections set straight, then we have all sorts of issues when it gets to the field about setting trim on the horizontal and vertical stabilizers.
It's at this point the jet starts to look like what's been ordered. In this case, a passenger carrier for Lufthansa. Each airline's fleet is tailor-made. After the final body join, the workers attach and test the jumbo's internal systems. Replace the 6.5-ton concrete blocks with the actual engines, and add all the finishing touches before its final paint job. At the end of 2001, Boeing started experimenting with building the plane on a moving production line, streamlining the manufacturing process as the jets move at a constant rate of 30 centimeters per hour through the final stages of assembly.
This is a huge change in the build process. It's pretty radical for some of those that have been in the industry for a long time to see this happen.
One almost complete 747-400 leaves the final assembly building every 8 nights. Such a rate of production can only be achieved with a very tightly managed schedule. The jumbos are usually towed from the assembly building to the outsized paint shop during the middle of the night. To get there, the jets must travel on a flyover across one of Washington's busiest roads. During the day, this spectacle would probably bring traffic to a standstill. The painting process involves the 747 losing its protective coating of green vinyl and gaining about half a ton of paint. At last, the brand new jumbo jet takes its place on the airfield to await its first flight. The first time the 747 takes to the sky, it's flown by a Boeing test pilot. That maiden flight is called a B-1. After a successful B-1 comes the customer, or C-1 flight.
It's Boeing 006 on HAF 2851.
Lufthansa pilot Captain Werner Meyerhofer will do the honors with this jet.
To me, it's the best airplane in the world. I used to be on a 737 before that, and that's a nice airplane too, but this is the queen of the skies. Boeing Everett, Boeing 006, radio check.
The 400 model of the Boeing 747 can cost up to $200 million. Customers inspect their investments inside and out before completing the transaction.
Fuel override center left.
Everything from vital systems like engines to cosmetic details invisible to the untrained eye are given the white glove treatment. Kicking the tires of a brand new 747 is one of Captain Meyerhofer's favorite duties.
It feels great, it feels special. It's a thing you don't do very often. Okay, sail call is loud and clear.
This jet sails smoothly through its inspection flights. Final delivery will be right on schedule. Final delivery is more about moving money around than moving jets.
Is this the export declaration for U.S. Customs or for state tax purposes?
For most of us, buying a house is the largest and most complicated purchase we'll ever make. So just imagine buying a jumbo jet. It's probably 1,000 times more expensive. And as well as the usual parties involved, there are international banks, local, state and federal tax offices, as well as export and import licenses to secure.
Done deal. Probably not surprised. We have a couple of keys to the cockpit. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
At last, the deal is done. Boeing's 1,293rd 747 becomes the latest addition to the Lufthansa fleet. With the ink barely dry, Captain Meyerhofer takes this brand new jet from its Washington birthplace east to its new home in Frankfurt. Every time one of these aeroplanes takes off from Everett for the last time, it's a big event.
When you first see one take off on a delivery to a customer, taking off the airfield, it's a really good feeling. It's very satisfying. It's hard to describe. It's overwhelming, really. It really is.
Each new generation of Boeing 747 jumbo jet that leaves the Washington plant is a testament to the company's original pioneering vision. The technical innovations of the 747's design date back to the military bombers it started to produce during the 1930s. In particular, the B-47, the first swept-wing jet bomber, which first appeared in 1947. The commercial impetus goes back to the company's dominance of the pre-war passenger airline building industry. Boeing's 10-passenger model, the 247, was dubbed the first modern passenger airliner when it made its debut in 1933. But until Boeing introduced the 707 in 1954, the majority of passengers flew by propeller-driven aircraft.
In the 60s, the development of the jet airliner really was coming into its own. You had the 707 and DC-8 in the States, the Convair family, VC-10 in Europe, and a myriad of new developments that were coming through in short to medium range airliners too. And what they were doing were establishing the new levels of safety and reliability in air transport.
In the mid-1960s, the world economy was booming. The population was growing, and passenger demand for jet travel was rocketing at a rate of 15% every year. Suddenly, the Boeing 707, which carried 120 passengers, just wasn't big enough anymore.
This was just so far beyond the capacity of the airlines to deal with at that time. So the airlines themselves were feeling the onslaught of this great demand, And they were the ones that started knocking on Boeing's door to say, hey, we want something bigger, we need something bigger.
Juan Tripp, chairman of the then industry giant Pan Am, was the first to knock at Boeing's door in 1966. If the company could develop a jet that would carry 350 passengers at Mach 0.9 on transoceanic routes, Pan Am would buy it.
Oprește-ți șuvițele să-și ia lumea în cap. Sunsilk cu aloe serum îți potolește firele revele și dă formă buclelor tale. Noul Sunsilk cu aloe serum, șampon și balsam.
Murder Trail tonight at 9 uncovers a police manhunt to track down cold-blooded killers. A chilling edge on Discovery.
Nyapam. Mat. Wa. Hawi.
Ya juegan kramash chapay yas kayaw kayaha chapay chawil ni yapin hoyas shek nyachs kayaw bagoma.
Sam Hui Sam Chape Payamit Kokopai Samit Chape Suwam Hui Kayus mit Nyapihani.
Connecting through culture, celebrating diversity.
Mun amalla Anna ja mä olen Sappelas. Mä olen tällä rensennes muu ahkuluhte. Ja tälle mä mun annan ja puolelle mun spaikki maailmit. Muu ahkule ohpaan muu hui olutinkai saamihpirra. Ja solo ahpan muu saami tuoju pirra. Hei Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. Hei Elohim, Elohim. Hei Elohim, Elohim. Mulle nuu kiihtulas, kun le pesan ahpa. Saami hetnam tuottari. Saami manai ruhtu. Mun algin joiga, kun mä leggen unni. Joiga am lohta käinu, muisteli toktu, suomestinka vai suomassa virra. Kun mä olin ilulas, te saada ilulas luohti. Ja kun mä olin mehtin, te saada luontu virra. Joigan ata faamu muu saami ellemi. Muu saami ruohtsa len nuute hallas munja ja mon inkalka kuassike atti puollai.
Connecting through culture, celebrating diversity.
Back in the late 60s, no one could have predicted the enduring success of Boeing's new 747 jumbo jet.
You've got to remember, this airplane was so big It was 2.5 times larger than the largest aeroplane in the sky at the time in terms of passenger capacity. It was a giant by every measurement.
The jet was such a giant that Boeing even developed this odd device nicknamed Waddell's Wagon for Chief Test Pilot Jack Waddell. Its purpose was to simulate the view and feel of the new style cockpit that sat an unprecedented 9 meters above the runway. During development, there were some who doubted the jet would ever fly.
I was asked to head up a small study group.
Joe Sutter was the director of engineering on the 747 program, considered by some to be the father of the jumbo jet.
We knew we could do the airplane from an engineering standpoint. What the airplane looked like was the biggest question.
2 versions of the 747 were rejected at the drawing board stage. This double-decker design and this wide-body jet nicknamed the Anteater. Today's jet more closely resembles the Anteater, with its wide fuselage and flight deck separate from the main cabin area. But the most distinctive feature of the 747 has always been its hump.
The rumor that it's the hump's here so the pilot can sit on his wallet isn't true. Well, the hump was part of the fact that we wanted to make a freighter airplane, so we put the cockpit above the main deck so we could have nose-in loading.
It was such a successful design innovation that even today the 747 can carry more cargo than any other civil jet.
So this 747 passenger airplane is truly amazing, but the freighter is awesome. It's the most economical way you can ship freight by air, whether it's 1 ton or 120 tons on the airplane. We've carried everything from whales to oil drilling equipment to a fleet of racehorses.
From the start, safety and reliability were paramount in the 747's design. Multiple systems or redundancies would be built in, from 4 separate hydraulic systems to 4-legged landing gear capable of landing safely should part of the system fail. This redundancy was the biggest stroke of engineering genius. The 747 was designed with an eye to the future, a hallmark that would turn out to be far more important than the ubiquitous hump.
I'd like to make a point that this airplane was laid out to be able to absorb technology. And the 747-400, the latest version of it, is way up there in technology.
On a wet February day in 1968, 747 number 1 was about to fly for the first time.
I took my wife, Nancy, and put her where the airplane was going to lift off because so many people had asked her the question, does your husband know this airplane will even fly? So I told Nancy, we know how it's going to fly, and if you stand here, the airplane will take off right here.
The co-pilot aboard the brand new jet was Brian Weigel.
It was with great relief, I think, when we finally taxied out and everything was working and the engines were running fine and we were okay. I think when we lifted off, it sent a great surge of emotion through us. We were busy, so we didn't hoot and holler, I don't think. I think we looked at each other and grinned broadly, but, we had radio communications and things to do.
As the new 747 took to the skies, she defied her doubters as well as gravity.
And here was this huge airplane that a lot of people didn't see how it could get in the air just because it was so big and so heavy, and there it was, flew beautifully, came back, landed beautifully, taxied in.
Okay, Jack, the actual question is, what are your impressions? Something that thing is just ridiculously easy to fly. It's just a pilot's dream.
That first successful flight marked the beginning of a rigorous and dangerous phase of the jet's development. Flight testing. One of the first design kinks engineers ironed out was flutter, the tendency of the plane wings to vibrate at high speeds.
It's something you deal with on every airplane. Most wings have a certain speed at which they become, they flutter is a good term, but they can disintegrate, and when it loads, it's a violent action.
The brand new Pratt & Whitney JT9D engines presented other problems.
During the testing phase, we actually wrecked 64 engines in the early days, and these were severe failures. Fan shafts breaking, turbine blades burning out, surges. There were a lot of problems to solve.
The engine problems would eventually be solved, but not before illustrating the scope of the 747 project. Developing new engines along with a new airframe was virtually unheard of, and it was an invitation to difficulty.
I told the engine manufacturer that one of the things I wanted to do when I retired, to get one of those engines, put it on a pedestal in front of my summer cabin, and when I felt frustration, go out and beat it with a 2x4. They never gave me the engine.
Testing was, and still is, an expensive process of controlled destruction. New jets are pushed to the absolute limits of their performance capabilities, both in the air and on the ground. Generations of test pilots have pushed forward the development of these jets, from the early 100 models through to the 400s being manufactured today. But for Brian Weigel, now Joe McDonnell's boss, and who heads up today's test pilots, one piece of valuable advice has become his watchword.
Said be careful.
This blazing brake test is called a rejected takeoff. Pilots accelerate at maximum weight, maximum speed, then stop dead just before takeoff. They then sit for 5 minutes doing absolutely nothing while a ground crew assesses the situation. This delay simulates real-life conditions.
You destroy with each test, you completely destroy a set of wheels, tires, and brakes, which is worth, even in those days, tens of thousands of dollars.
These days, the same rejected takeoff test is done on the 747-400 state-of-the-art carbon brakes. However, a bad decision by the ground crew can be a little more expensive.
Someone has to make a pretty critical call because the test costs, I think, on the order of about $1 million to do. You don't want to redo it if you don't have to.
Those 5 original 747s were put through the most rigorous testing program ever performed on a civil jet.
In the production limitation record. This concludes the final flight certification report for the Model 747. Thank you all, Jim.
In January 1967, less than a year after its maiden flight, the first commercial Boeing 747 entered service for Pan Am on the prestigious New York to London route. Air Force One is just one of numerous specialist models that have made this jet a bestseller. Today's 747-400s have exterior and interior innovations that simply didn't exist when the jet was first developed.
The 747-400 was a reaction to the airline's needs and a reaction to the fact that there was a lot of technology that we could add to the 747 that would improve its reliability, its maintainability, lower its production cost. And it really was, if you think about it, a remake of the airplane from a system standpoint.
The 400 model is bigger. It can carry more passengers, weighs 6,000 more kilograms, and flies 5,000 kilometers further non-stop than its predecessors. One of the most visible differences on the 747-400 are the drag-reducing winglets. Composite and aluminium tips extend upwards 1.3 meters on the end of each wing. They trap and use air that otherwise would bleed off the end of the wing.
They added to the efficiency of the wing. and they provide a little extra range by increasing the effective lift of the wing.
And thanks to the winglets, the 400 can still squeeze into a standard-sized airport bay while enjoying the benefits that would in the past have only been achieved with a greater wingspan. Mechanic Corey Stalcup seldom gets called by his real name.
No, they call me the winglet guy, among other things.
Ironically, these high-tech NASA-developed winglets are applied to the 400 in a rather low-tech manner. They're so light, it only takes a couple of helpers to fix them into place.
Thank you, gentlemen. Then beat it into place.
Other big changes have taken place inside the 400, especially on the flight deck. Older 747s were flown by 3 crew members, a pilot, co-pilot and flight engineer.
This is Boeing 006 on HF285.
But Boeing wanted to create a standardized cockpit so that flight crews could easily transfer between one Boeing aeroplane and another.
The really huge change was to go from 3 flight crew members on the flight deck to 2. So we eliminated the position of the flight engineer.
Crews have had to get used to the cockpit's new ability to do lots of the tasks an engineer once did. On this jet, computers could work out the most efficient route, check tire pressure, even automatically land the aeroplane. This is the original 747 cockpit, a far cry from the latest one.
Thank you. The airplane tells us everything which is not normal. Fueling station.
Cathode ray instrument displays replaced the old electromechanical gauges.
Mark.
And the latest 400 models have been further improved with the addition of more reliable liquid crystal instrument displays. On older 747s, flight crews had to monitor a bewildering 971 lights, gauges and switches. That number has now been reduced to a more sensible 365. The 400s have also had new, faster, more efficient engines designed to meet today's stricter noise regulations. These quieter engines can take the Jumbo more than 13,000 kilometers non-stop. The changes that most passengers will notice are the up-to-date interior features, although some might prefer the nostalgia of the old sofas and spiral staircases. The interiors have been completely rethought, and some of the 400s currently being ordered can accommodate a stunning 568 passengers.
This is the crew rest for our cabin crew.
Crew bunks were added behind the cockpit and in the plane's tail section, as flights can now last over 16 hours. New fire-resistant paneling was added, along with larger overhead lockers. This gave the 400 more baggage capacity per passenger than any other wide-bodied plane. The 747's handlers load more than 42,000 kilograms of luggage into the plane in less than 7 minutes. When you see this enormous jet swallowing 5,500 kilograms of food to feed hundreds of hungry passengers and guzzling over 200,000 litres of fuel, you understand the nickname crew members fondly bestow upon this beast.
We call him the whale, the whale.
Just for the record, this jet dwarfs the average blue whale, which weighs in at only 100,000 kilograms. With the new 747-400ER, the Jumbo is going to get even heavier, weighing in at a massive 415,000 kilograms. But the increased weight doesn't seem to affect its handling.
for its size. I think among the Boeing test pilots at least, it's widely regarded as the easiest airplane to land.
The gentle landings are due to something called ground effect. The plane's massive size compresses the air beneath it as it nears the ground, creating an invisible cushion that softens the landing. The 747's most obvious claim to fame may be its size, but the jumbo jet has also won some rather high-profile jobs.
The most famous 747 that we have is Air Force One.
You know, everywhere I go in that airplane, I am the second most important celebrity. People really just want to see the plane.
This Boeing 747-200 is owned by the United States Air Force. It's been fitted with everything from heat-seeking missile protection to an air-to-air refueling system. This 747 could effectively serve as an airborne White House, should anything happen to the real one. And it was a 747 that ferried the Space Shuttle Enterprise for NASA during testing. These planes have even been recruited by the US military to defend the country with lasers. The ABL, or Airborne Laser, is a joint project between Boeing, TRW and Lockheed Martin to develop a 747 capable of blasting ballistic missiles out of the sky. The Boeing 747 has maintained its status as Queen of the Skies for more than 3 decades. It's an old jet by anyone's standards, but Boeing are determined to keep it up to date and cutting edge.
The toughest thing about being the chief engineer of the 747 is controlling our appetite for innovation. Our engineer said, why can't we just start over? Why can't we just take a clean sheet of paper with the 47 and start over? And it's like, wait, we don't want to do that. We've got a really good thing going here.
But this stately aircraft is about to meet a challenger from one of Boeing's biggest competitors. It will be the 747's toughest test yet. But Boeing have a plan.
Impresionante hall de entrada y tenemos también un despacho, tenemos la televisión de plasma, el sofá,
Picture messaging from Vodafone Live. Journey inside the martial arts, as seen in an entirely new way. How can such speed, power, and stamina be generated by the human body, by a life force that surrounds us called Qi? Bear witness to true enlightenment. Warrior Zone. Wednesday on Discovery Channel.
Pioneers of Flight is sponsored by Airbus, celebrating 100 years of flight.
Min far, Jakob Ellehammer, blev anerkendt i Danmark som den første europæer, der kom op og flyve. Hvis han kunne erstatte snorens træk i dragen med en propel, så var det muligt at lave en flyvemaskine. Det skete i 1906, den 12. september. Højden var ikke mere end 40 centimeter cirka. Flyvningen, jeg tror, den varede en 20 sekunder. Det var det hele.
Pioneers of Flight were sponsored by Airbus, creating the next 100 years of flight.
Vigorous rulers. Brilliant minds. Mighty warriors. Legendary leaders. Powerful visionaries. The greatest men in history had one thing in common. They were only human. Discovery opens the vaults of some of the most fascinating figures from the past. Wednesday at 10.
I see things you'd never believe. I make them believable. I find you innovation and originality. I uncover how things work. I illuminate ideas and explore concepts and find new frontiers with endless possibilities. Where there are problems, I find opportunities. I find inspiration in the stories I have to tell. What am I? I'm a discovery. You can share my imagination.
Boeing's biggest rival, Airbus, has developed a brand new jumbo jet. New facilities have been constructed for this latest European creation, the A380, a mega jumbo. Measuring in at 73 meters, 3 meters longer than the 400, it can carry more than 600 passengers. This jet will be the first to challenge the 747's reign as Queen of the Skies. When Boeing developed the 747 over 30 years ago, the company predicted a future where more people would travel, and further. Helped by the 747 itself, this prediction has turned out to be correct.
It completely revolutionized the way that cultures and nations intermixed, because it just turned up the scale. It actually revolutionized things in capacity terms, and in a lot of ways it helped promote the interaction of societies and cultures on a scale which hadn't been seen before.
Boeing are now making another prediction. More people will want to travel directly to destinations rather than changing flights at so-called hubs, as they do now. The two companies differ in their approach to passenger travel. Airbus are concentrating on hub-to-hub. Boeing are putting their money on point-to-point.
We think that the world will grow up in point-to-point. They believe that the world will grow up with the same transportation infrastructure, and large aircraft will be required. The world will tell us in a few years which one made the right bet.
Boeing have innovative design plans still on the drawing board. The company is developing a brand new supersonic jet. All of the changes within the airline industries may finally mean the end of the line for the 747.
Nobody thought that the 747 program would still be alive and well 35 years after the first airplane came out. Nobody anticipated that.
But in the meantime, billions of dollars worth of orders mean the 747 is thriving like never before. Boeing continues to tinker with the design. The new long-range model, the 400ER, is already at the testing stage, and customers are lining up for this latest generation.
What we think of the 747 is 30 years of continuous learning and improvement. 30 years of understanding from our customers what their needs are, improving how the product works, and adapting not only the airplane, but the way in which we produce it to the current needs of the airlines and their customers, the shippers and the passengers.
The 747 family has already surpassed all expectations of longevity. Guy Norris believes this is set to continue.
The demand is such that I think we'll see 747s flying for at least another 50 years in some cases. I would honestly say that.
The 747 may soon have to surrender its title as the biggest aircraft. But as it continues to fly, it will still be the longest living aircraft of all time. Boeing 747s have been a part of our lives for over 3 decades. The very familiarity of their shape a tribute to the technological excellence of the team who continue to build them.
I still stand there and look at the airplane, look at the factory it's built in, and think about what we do. I mean, it's a miracle of capability and working together. Every time a 747 gets put together with its millions of parts and takes off from Everett Field. Maybe the real miracle is the fact that nearly 1,300 of those 747s have done just exactly that.